does that look like in terms of the amount of calories, like something a typical client you have, like trying to guide them through that, and whether or not it's consistently throughout, or you're doing it intermittently, like what's that look like?
So I think this is, again, you got to look at what is the personality of the person. So initially, like Adam, when you came out of a competition prep and you're like going in the off season, like you're very strong mentally, but the average person, they're like, oh, it's off season time, I get to fucking eat everything. And like you give them a protocol, and let's say it's a protocol that's like pretty calorically in a surplus, but you also have to know that this person is probably going to have a propensity to eat off that plan. So let's just say you're estimating daily energy expenditure to be 3,000. You decide to put them in a calorie surplus of 1,000, so you're giving them 4,000. You have to know that inherently this person's probably going to be consuming closer to 5,000, right? Like adjusted for weekly average intake based on how many times they're going to deviate. I don't think that's advisable at all, right? That's a recipe for a lot of fat gain, not a lot of muscle gain. And remember, your body has a certain range where it's most efficient, right? Where once you step outside of that, you're gaining more fat than you're gaining muscle. So I'm a little bit of a slower approach guy myself, but I don't even want to necessarily speak to speed as much as it is sustainability. Like I don't want, if your goal is to build muscle and then you're going to look in the mirror 2 weeks later and be like, oh my God, I'm fat, and now you feel like you want to cut, that's a problem in and of itself. So, I guess the questions I would then turn around and ask are why are we building muscle, right? Is it for a stage? Is it just for life? Is it for strength? Like what is the purpose? Is there a time that like we need to have this muscle built?
Say it's just this person that wants to
get bigger, right? Like
and
lifestyle.
lean though at the same time,
right? So then we're going to put you in a super small deficit or a super small surplus, which by the way, like longevity says you should be in a super small deficit, but from a super small surplus and then accounting for life, like I'm talking like 200 to 300 calories.
Oh, it's
surplus.
a real small deficit.
Very small surplus, right?
Or surplus.
Yeah, very small surplus. But then you factor in life. Date night happens, couple drinks happen, and now look at like the weekly adjusted surplus.
But you're going in there as a coach knowing that. So
I'm going in there knowing that. It's not a prescription based on what's physiologically correct.
Now, is this something that you teach your coaches also?
100%.
Oh, so this is all part of the conversation. So this is why we like you guys, because that makes perfect sense. Because if you don't account for what's probably going to happen, then your recommendation plus life is going to add up to too big of a surplus.
Well, you don't get to live in a fantasy world, right? I mean, like we can live in the lab all day. The lab isn't where life takes place, right? Like we step out of here and fucking life hits us, and you never know what's going to happen. Well, you got to be ready to account for it.
That's the problem of the coaches and trainers and people that purely speak from the scientific studies that are with these small control groups, and then that they get their direction purely from that. It's like there's so many other things that you have to account for that have nothing to do with that.
Part of it's experience, but luckily, again, like you guys are teaching people the right way. It's like, hey, look, here's what it says on paper. You want them at a 400 to 500 calorie surplus. But here's what happens in real life. You put them on a 200 calorie surplus because they're going to mess up a few times during the week, which is going to come out to about a 500 calorie surplus.
Yeah, when you start creating that weekly adjustment, it does. And then, it is experience, man. I mean, again, like we can't expect the general population to act with the the level of being strict as like a competitor would, or as somebody of like a lab, right? You can't expect the general population to have their actions align with lab controlled settings. It's not going to ever happen.